We welcome you to Out of This World, Women in VR, moderated by Courtney Harding.
Make sure the mic's working. So, hi everyone, thank you so much for coming out on this really cold, awful night. I thought last week the winter was over, and then I came back for one more fun weekend. So thanks again for coming out to this really amazing event. I'm so happy that we have such a great turnout and such an incredible panel of people you're going to hear from. So I'll just real quick introduce myself, I'll have the panel introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right in. So my name is Courtney Harding. I wear many hats. I am a consultant in the VR space. I have a wonderful client right now called Moth and Flame that I'm doing some work for. I also work in the cryptocurrency space, which is not super relevant to this panel, but if it's of interest, I'm happy to chat about it. I write for a number of outlets, and I actually teach here at the Clive Davis School of Music. So a lot of different things, all really fun and exciting and very cool. So I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump in. So I'll pass the mic down, and then, and then as long as the mics sort of circulate back and forth, we should be okay. We'll figure it out. We're smart people.
Thank you. My name is Stephanie Llamas. I'm VP of Research at SuperData Research. It's a market research firm here in New York City. We started out researching digital games, and I have grown our research department to now cover virtual reality. So that's what I focus on primarily these days. And we've also extended that past games. So now we're looking at virtual reality in all spaces, including enterprise, entertainment, cinematic, VR, 360, and so on.
Hi, my name is Lily Baldwin. Oh, it's really loud. It's a pleasure to be here. I was a professional dancer for 10 years, started making films when I was on tour with David Byrne, these sort of raw stop-motion films. Taught myself filmmaking and have been working kind of the experimental narrative space for 7 years. And then just completed my first VR project, co-direction with Sascha Unseld, through the premiered at Sundance. And he's the creative director of Oculus. So it was a real interesting conversions for my first time to be immersed in a lot of technological savvy as an artist and taking a lot of risks in that space. And now I have a bunch of VR stuff that I'm working on. Really excited about the space.
Hi, everyone. I'm Maya Tippett. I'm the technical director at Scenic VR, founded by Gary Hustwit and Jessica Edwards. They're both independent filmmakers, so we really are coming from the documentary world and storytelling in VR. We completed 3 projects with Wall Street Journal that premiered at the Daydream headset most recently. So my background is much more in documentary filmmaking and editing, and then we took this venture into VR, so it's really been a lot of self-taught experiences and learning as we go, and it's a really exciting place for new storytelling, so I'm very honored and excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Alissa Crevier. I'm the Global Head of Brand Partnerships at Littlstar, which is a global network. It's a distribution network dedicated really to 360 and VR content, premium content, and we distribute all of the content agnostically across all the headsets that are available in iOS and Android. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that, but thank you for having me here.
Hi, my name is Adaora, Udoji. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here. I'm also, among many things, I should say, I'm a adjunct upstairs at ITP. I'm a storyteller. I spent about 15 years in television, producing some of it and being on TV. And in the last 5 years, I've been working in the startup and digital space, and the last 2 years in VR and AR, mostly on the investment side, working for a firm that was, was investing heavily on the seed side, as well as producing some small experiences. And right now, I'm knee deep in 3 different projects. 2 of them are VR, and 1 of them is AR. And it's just an extraordinarily exciting time. And I think we're all hacking it away at it. There's nobody's got this yet.
Hi, my name,
I think turn it on.
that would be good. Hi, I'm excited to be here. My name is Ashley Baccus-Clark. I am a molecular biologist and writer. I'm also a partner at Hyphen Labs, and we just had a project debut at Sundance called Neurospeculative Afrofeminism, or Not Safe as Fuck. And it is a physical installation with a VR component. And yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, this panel is Women in VR. I kind of want to focus more on the VR side of things because I feel like I've been on a lot of like women in panels, and I feel like it's always more interesting to talk about what we're actually in, rather than the fact that we're all women here. Although I would like to point out that VR, and I've read a couple different articles about this, VR actually has like a pretty decent female representation for technology, right? So big caveat, it's for technology. But what I've read is as sort of tech industries and startup industries go, VR actually does better, which is a very low bar, but still. So I want to start out, and we've addressed this a little bit, but I want to ask, what is the biggest challenge in VR right now? What is the biggest thing that people are facing? Is it there's funding issues? Is it that people still don't know what VR is? Like, what are people's biggest concerns and challenges right now?
And I'll just let people can just dive in and pass the mic around. I'll keep it pretty loose.
I suppose I'll start since I have it. At least on the, we see on the market side, obviously certain pieces, and I'm sure on the creative side there are other perspectives, but primarily we're finding, it's really difficult to get people to just try VR. Obviously, if you haven't tried it before, there's nothing I can say or do to show you what it is. So you have to experience it to actually be able to conceptualize it, and you're asking people to be proactive in that first time that they're using it. So you're telling people that you're trying to get people to say that they want to try something that they have no idea what to expect. And then issues often arise where if you experience bad VR your first time, or if you experience a cardboard headset and think, oh, this is what a Vive must also be like, that can also really make it difficult to get audiences and consumers to recognize the breadth of VR and the technology and capabilities. So I think, that to me is the most difficult part that we have right now.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, just from experience with going to Sundance, funding was such a big challenge for us. We initially funded ourselves and then found funding pretty late in the game that kind of just got us there. But it's if you're wanting to create something in the medium, there's a really high barrier to entry as far as the hardware and sort of the startup cost if you don't have access to headsets or VR-ready computers. It's a really big financial expenditure initially, and that's not to mention learning how to develop in these technologies, though they may be free. It's a huge learning curve.
Yeah, I think it costs a lot to have it look really good, and that it's actually great. There's some really cheap cameras you can use them and explore this sort of the conceptual space of narrative and immersion in 360, which I think is an amazing place to play with and kind of stretch ourselves to think about. But to pull it off with sort of finesse and polish and plausibility because of the resolution is really, that is the challenge. I also have a hard time with how exclusive the distribution is, that you need this creature of a thing to watch and experience. And I'm actually working with creating a couple 2D reincarnations and kind of group experiences around Through You, which is a live action dance piece. But how to kind of create a conversation around it that isn't just visible on a headset. So it is sort of a larger gestalt, is the way I've been trying to solve it.
I would say in one word, everything is a challenge.
Yeah.
Because you're running on parallel tracks. You have problems with the distribution of the headsets, just headsets getting anywhere where someone might use them. I think there's somewhere in the neighborhood, I saw numbers last week, 30 million in the United States, roughly. Most of them are hardboard. And the premium experiences are on Oculus and HTC Vive, and those are very expensive. The whole setup is very expensive. Then you have distribution of content. Before you even get to the distribution of content, you got to talk about the actual content itself. There are challenges straight along the production, the workflow. There are challenges with the hardware, with 360 cameras, or the software, editing, and the basic question of what is VR and how do we tell a story. Language. You have so many different people who are sitting at the table in order to create something in virtual reality. storytellers, technologists, producers, et cetera, et cetera. And so realizing none of us can say for any certainty right now what the full realization of this extraordinary technology will be. And many of us, and I'm sure sitting here, are living for the dream of what it might be and have been very excited by some of the evolutions that have happened. It's all a challenge, which also creates a tremendous amount of opportunity.
Yeah, well, from just the storytelling side of it, it's a real learning curve trying to retrain your brain if you're used to kind of some of the old tricks of, I'm going to cut to that tight B-roll shot to get away from this interview or whatever. You don't have those luxuries in VR. So it's really, you have to retrain your brain basically in terms of how you're going to tell this story. And I'm just curious, I know this is a VR panel, so it might be silly to ask, but how many people have actually experienced VR in the room? Okay, cool. So yeah, some of the challenges really I think are the outreach of people getting a chance to experience VR and good VR in a way that seeing it on an Oculus versus seeing something on a Samsung Gear is a very different experience because you have a phone that's not going to be a 4K resolution phone 2 inches from your face versus seeing something on a hard computer. There's a really big difference in resolution, and I think we're so used to very high resolution films when we go out to the movie theater to kind of now being this place where VR is happening. We expect the same thing, but it's not there yet. So that's definitely a challenge. And then also marketing. There's so many different companies that are getting into the VR game. We just did 3 videos for Wall Street Journal, and they came out through the Google Pixel phone on Daydream. So that's its own headset separate from the Gear VR or Oculus or the Vive. And it's one of those things, my mom's like, I'd love to see these videos. I'm like, do you have a Pixel phone? No. Do you have a Google headset? No. There's no way for you to see it. So a lot of people, an answer to that is to, we can have it be web-based, and if we put it on YouTube, then it'll get a lot of hits and a lot of likes, because that's accessible to everyone, but then you're losing the VR experience when you're changing it to desktop. So I think those are some key challenges.
I have 2 microphones now.
There you go.
I'll just use this one. So I think that some of the biggest problems or barriers for us, it's not distribution because that's what we focus on, but I'd say it's changing human behavior. So, think about right now, we all go home and, admittedly, look at Netflix or look at Amazon and we watch a show, and then we also have our laptop open because we're always working, and then we also always have our phones in front of us. So what is it going to take to change human behavior so that it's commonplace to put a headset on, especially with the headsets? Many people have touched on how expensive they are. I think PlayStation is actually one headset that I don't think has been mentioned yet, which is a really, it's interesting. It kind of sits in the middle of what we've all been talking about up here. But what is it going to take to change that behavior is one of the most important and more difficult barriers that we see. And then I'd say secondly, the fact that when you are in a headset, it's a singular experience, and a lot of people touch on this as well. So what does that look like when we try to make it a shareable experience? What if the 2 of us want to go home and we're going to sit and watch a VR piece together? You can't do that really right now, but imagine what it will look like in a year or 2 years. We're already seeing prototypes with some of our partners where you're sitting in your living room and your living room is actually paneled with glass. It's not just one piece of glass. So home theaters, we expect to see huge changes, hopefully, if this medium is all that we expect it to be. And then, I also think that theaters will change immensely as well. So we'll see domes and planetariums coming out as commonplace in theaters and entertainment too.
So I didn't mean to kick it off on sort of a
downer note, but what I did want to do is sort of establish the fact that, VR is still really in its infancy, and, it's not even like you need the foundation to build the house. Like, you need to dig the hole to build the house, right? Like, you need to dig the foundation, and I feel like we're just now starting to, dig a tiny bit. So I just wanted to establish that this is still an incredibly new medium. But the most interesting thing was that, the idea of retraining how we experience content, because I think most people experience content in a very lean back way, right? So you were passively watching TV, you're passively watching a movie, you're passively consuming this content, and this content is someone else's vision. And what VR does is you actively consume the content, right? Like, sure, you could just stare at something in VR, but that's not really the point. And the person who's creating that experience has to give up control on a certain level, right? So, I've heard people say like, oh, let's do The Godfather in VR. And I'm like, no, that's exactly the wrong idea, because the whole point of Casablanca is not Casablanca if the ending is like, and they lived happily ever after. That's not Casablanca. That's not the work. That's not the point. So, I think one of the most interesting things about VR is people have to be trained to consume content in a completely different way. And people also have to be trained to create content in a different way. And I gave a talk in San Francisco on Monday where I was like, if you just bolt VR onto existing narrative structures, it's just like, it's not that interesting, right? So I'd love to get other people's sort of take on that, like where we seem to be kind of stuck in a place right now a lot of the time where it's like there's and I wish I could show it, I should have brought my laptop. There's a BMW commercial in 360 with a model, and she like walks to these BMWs and they're driving, and it's a 360 experience, but if you look straight ahead, it's cool, right? There's these 3 cars, there's a hot woman, and it's great. But if you look this way, or this way, which you're supposed to do in 360, right? That's the whole point. It's like a desert. So you're like, great, I'm so glad I turned my head to see nothing. Awesome, why was this even in 360? So, and just in terms of like creating a new language, and maybe the challenges in terms of like retraining both audiences to consume through VR content and then creators to actually create the content that makes sense.
So I'll let people jump in.
I can start. I guess. I thought that was interesting because we collaborate with a few companies. We have a data network where different types of companies give us different types of data or information that they're getting from their, from whatever their product is. And one of them is a company called RetinAd, and they do analytics for ads. And something they told us that was super interesting was people will look around themselves, in 360 for maybe 10, 20, 30 seconds tops. And then that's it. They kind of look forward. And it's not necessarily, it's a habit that we have, obviously, with traditional media, but it's also sometimes content. It's about training the consumer also to experience that content in a way that's interesting to them. So, another thing, one of the ads they put us in was a Fruity Pebbles ad, and it's 360, and there are all these things happening, and you actually do look around you the entire time. So it does a great job, but then at the end they went, did you notice you were sitting in a bowl of cereal? And I had no idea, because I didn't look down. And they said, nobody looks up and nobody looks down. So it's true. There are all these challenges, as a viewer, as somebody who spends literally every day of my life watching VR, talking about VR, reading about VR, whatever, I still do all of those sorts of things. And I see those challenges as someone who's not a content creator. So I think on the content side, it must be a huge challenge because we're all so embedded in the content. We feel like there are things that, we kind of maybe take for granted. But then trying to get somebody who is not used to this medium and not dealing with it every day to not only sit in it for the first time and get it, but get your content. I would imagine that's a huge challenge.
Mm-hmm.
I think the question, for me, it's sort of been a relief to not think about 2 dimensions. I was always trying to put myself, but I made kind of more visceral cinema inside of 2 dimensions, and now it's like, exhale. I can work with simultaneous things happening at once. It's like living in real life. And I think this is a great question because it's so underutilized, the 360 degrees. And the question for me is like, why do we look at something? Why do we care about a direction? Well, either we are learning something new, or we're aligning with something that's familiar, or we can change it. So I think people have to either get bored with the direction that they're looking at, and that'll inspire them to change, or it'll actually engage us in movement. And I think people have to figure out what's interesting to their audience, and then that's the question they answer with directionality, narratively. And also think about simultaneous plots all at once. And then it's that inherent 360-degree simultaneity that then is the premise of your script. You need to tell a story that can't be told in any other way. Otherwise, just make a film. Like, seriously, film's awesome, you know?
I also think that the medium is starved for good content. Just kind of going through the process of creating VR and watching a lot of VR, a lot of it just isn't that interesting. And because we are at the forefront of it, it's like it's a level playing field that if you are willing to get past that sort of learning curve, then you can tell really good stories. And companies like Jaunt, who has this stereoscopic camera, they're looking for people who can tell stories in a very mature way and use the technology that's existing. So I think once we start thinking about this as a medium that's kind of separate from film, that kind of looks to some of the signifiers of it, but it is its own form, then we can start looking at the way that we come at story from 360 degrees.
I would just say that I often think of VR, AR as if it were a person with a life expectancy of 78 years old. We're about a year old right now, and I think that's probably even pushing it. How do you tell a story in virtual reality? 360 is one medium, and then you have CGI and all the live action where you can create your entire world and you are not restricted by time or space. There's a tremendous amount of experimenting that has to happen or in order for us to understand what may or may not work. And so I hear people, you hear that among people who are deep in this a lot. Well, there's a lot of bad contact. That doesn't actually bother me a lot. I mean, the concern is obviously that when you're trying to introduce something new to audiences and you want it to scale, you don't want too many people to have bad experiences and then you have to work twice as hard to get them back. The thing that I think that makes VR different than some of the other tech evolutions is that all of us are just as likely potentially to come into contact with it at work as we are at home. And when I say that, it makes it different than, say, your computers. And I mean, obviously mobile's a little different. But the idea is just that there are actual practical applications right now that are optimizing core businesses in various sectors that they're using every day. And on the other hand, you have things like Pokemon Go and you have PlayStation. And so you have these potential portals, but the types of experiences are so broad, everything from gaming to cinematic or interactive storytelling or immersive experiences, be they educational or otherwise, that there's just so much that we have to, us content creators, have to, try to see what may or may not work.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I think some of the most successful documentary storytelling that I've seen in VR, it's always has to have a very experiential aspect of it. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with Felix and Paul, but they have a series called Nomads, which was really incredible to see because they were going to different cultures that they were nomadic, and you would never really be able to visit them or know where to go, or it's not like you buy a plane ticket and you can experience it. So feeling that in VR was incredible to kind of like feel immersed in this totally different culture that you would never get to see. So something like that I think is really effective. And then I don't know if is anyone familiar with Tilt Brush? That's another, that's something I could spend hours in versus, being in a cinematic experience where someone's telling me a story and experience a story. So kind of figuring out how to combine those interactive, angles into storytelling is also something that isn't really totally being done yet in terms of cinematic storytelling. So that, I think, is also the next step that would be really helpful. And then just kind of a test that we did when we first started the company about a year ago, we were, as documentary filmmakers, making VR and kind of using tricks of the trade or
having voiceover to tell the story while, you're not seeing an interview of someone. And we would show it to, a draft to a friend, and we found that with having so much going on around you, you're not actually taking in what someone's saying. So to have someone talking and telling you a story, you actually have to really cut it down, be really precise, and have a sentence here or a sentence there, because it's too overwhelming to have a story in your ear and taking in every aspect all around you. So that's also a learning curve for us, but also an exciting one. Yeah. I guess, a lot has been said already. I think that, there's something that we always say is, if you can do it in 2D, go do it in 2D. But I think that in terms of VR, in 360, what we have created for the content creators is a piece of technology in which you can actually see where people are looking in any piece of content that you have through heat maps. So then you can go back and use special features like directional sound or light, or actually one of the better cinematic pieces, My Brother's Keeper, that's now out on PBS. Brian has used fading on either side of the frame that worked pretty well to tell the story, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful and really well done. And it's 10 minutes long, and you would never feel like it's 10 minutes long. So I think that, by using those kind of creator tools, it's we can hopefully, all learn from one another in that sense.
So I know I said I would stick to the VR part more than the women part, but I just have to point out, I do a lot of panels, and I do a lot of panels that are all male. It's like me and 4 dudes up on stage, and I sometimes do panels that are all women, and all female panels, everyone is so polite. It's really wonderful, because I've been on all male panels where I ask a question, everyone's jumping on the mics and cutting each other off, and everyone's just oh, did you get your turn? So anyway, it's wonderful. I love it. So, the next question is really a little bit, Adaora, what you sort of said, and I'd love to have you address this because you have been on this side of things, is getting VR content funded, because I think the biggest problem right now on the content side of things, not so much the hardware side, maybe on the hardware side of things too, and other people can certainly jump in too. I know that you've had specific experience, so I wanted to sort of start with you. What are the opportunities for VR creators in terms of funding? Where's the money going to come from? Is it going to come from Oculus and HTC and Google? Is it going to come from brands? Is it going to come from investment? Is it going to come from I think the founder of the company I consult for is probably on Hollywood Boulevard selling his plasma right now. God love him. We were eating street cart food in San Francisco because we're such a scrappy little company, and I don't want him to sell his blood, so I would like some other money. So yeah, I'd love to, if you wanted to kick it off, and then we can talk about other experiences that folks have had getting their content funded, because I think that's, again, the biggest hurdle right now, or one of them certainly.
This is the very vein of my existence. And here's the heart of what I find utterly confounding. Is that a word? Is this. If you take a look at the estimates, the projections, in less than 10 years, according to Goldman, according to Citibank, you're looking at billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars of market. Baseline, 85 billion, Goldman says. Baseline, north of 600 billion, according to Citi. An enormous portion of this is predicated on the content. We don't know how to make the content. We don't know how to systemize this process. We don't have all of the tools. Again, the R&D needs to happen. Well, who's going to pay for that? Right now, it's scattered and it's incredibly global. You can't talk about this industry and just talk about the United States. And I say that because you have first of all, many of the tech companies, the big tech companies, right, they're breaking the waves. The HTC, Samsung, Google, Microsoft, so on. Clearly, they're doing all Oculus. They're doing all sorts of experimenting, Oculus Story Lab, and so on and so forth. HTC, they've got a variety of different grants and so on. So you have the tech companies who are making the hardware and the software who are doing this. Then you have the brands who are experimenting with this. But I have to tell you, in the last year, I've seen a slight contraction here, which is lots of brands too, right? Everything from Colgate to Popeyes to Mercedes. They've been experimenting with a variety of different. contracting a little bit because there's no longer a wowie moment. When Game of Thrones, HBO did Game of Thrones a couple of years ago, it was a big deal because nobody had created a VR experience like that, ever. And in fact, the technology until the last 5 or 6 years just hadn't been viable where you could create something like that where you had more people versus less who could go through that at a beginning, middle, of an end and not get sick. So you have the brands. They're hiring companies, so a little bit to experiment. And then you have the subsidies in a variety of the Nordic countries spending a lot of money subsidizing this industry. In Canada, you have a variety of different grants and so on and so forth. In the state of New York, there are grants. The NEA, by the way, they are dying for proposals on interactive storytelling. They don't get enough because a lot of people don't know they have money. It's both the NEA and then the New York State Arts Council. They also have money.
I don't know
in
how
fact,
much longer the NEA is
the
gonna have
21,
money
well, they have money
unfortunately.
now. They have money now, and the state of New York has money now, and there's a deadline of the 21st of this month, actually, for a potential grant of up to $100,000. So it's really hodgepodge. I think it'll consolidate as we move forward, but we need to catch fire on some level, I think, in order to push this content creation and money for funders down the road a bit. Oh, and universities.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, yeah, I know
I want to make a comment about the markets. I think that also Japan, Korea, China, the Asian markets are huge and a lot of funding. We'll see how that shakes out because we know how kind of it works in the entertainment industry there. But and then also I think that we have seen actually a lot of VC funds. We've been talking to a lot of VCs that are starting to create content funds. So that's exciting, I think.
We got our money from Oculus, and we also had a grant with Sundance and Jaunt, which is a new initiative that they did. So we had a lot of in-kind work from Jaunt. We used their camera and did a bunch of test shoots. So that was really helpful and it was pretty dreamy, actually, knowing that will not always be the case.
Well, one thing that I heard that was interesting back at VRDC was a couple companies were talking about development studios that develop content that facilitates enterprise applications as ways to fund their own projects. So there are companies that are receiving funding from brands, for instance, to create content for brands, or for different companies to create facilitation apps. And that way they're able to somewhat fund their own content. But then also the platforms are very excited. And I think, part of that, on the HTC side, they're most excited currently with enterprise. So if you're able to create something with enterprise that can also translate into what you're interested in, that's always an opportunity. And I know, it's maybe not the most exciting thing for narrative or creative content, but interestingly, a lot of enterprise applications and creative content kind of facilitate each other. They go hand in hand. So if there is a way to do one and the other, there's a lot of possibilities for funding there.
I would I just want to say one thing about that. VCs hate content. They do. It doesn't scale, right? So there's on the investment side and the tech companies, yes, they're spending a lot of money trying to build infrastructure. So they're looking for solutions to hardware, solutions to software, and things that are going to help all of us create tools. 20 years ago, to make a website, you had to go find somebody who knew how to code. Today, you can get on Squarespace, right? It takes you 5 minutes. So the question is, what's the equivalent of that in this virtual space? What does that look like? And then on the other hand, you do need, it's a chicken and egg, right? You need the content to drive the headsets, but you need the headsets, otherwise you'd never, ever have to have any content. And because there's so much uncertainty on how to scale this business, just on the hardware and the software side, there's a lot of attention being paid to that, which makes it difficult to identify where the pockets of money are for funding to make that content, which is why, like Intel, IBM, some of these big tech companies, they have all these very cool innovations in technology, and they're paying for content because they need to be able to show that off. But it's not systematic. It's very difficult to build a business making content just going from project to project. It's being done, but that's usually not your primary job.
Yeah, and I wanted to sort of two things on the conversation that we just had. One is, I'm keeping the scope of this limited to like cinematic VR only because this is a cinema and film event. Certainly, there are tremendous applications for VR in healthcare and enterprise and education, and VR has many, many other sort of applications beyond just the cinematic stuff. So that's one thing, and that's true. There are a lot of companies that are just, they'll do like, a virtual walkthrough of a building, and that's what funds their like virtual movie about something that they really love. And I think that's super common in a lot of industries. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was really the idea of how does VR scale, right? So what I've seen a lot, and I deal with this in the companies I consult for, and I've talked to tons and tons of people, and this is also a problem I think for consumption, is like there's no steady stream of VR content, right? So I haven't seen yet a VR series, really. I haven't seen, like I put on my headset almost every day, and there are often, days go by where there's not really much new content, or, so I have a Gear VR at home, and then I have access to a Rift and a Vive in an office that I work out of, and, I did run up once a $200 Steam bill, which I felt a little, it was market research. But again, like I'll go on the Steam store, which is where you buy content, one of the places you can buy content, and like again, there's just not that much stuff on there, and a lot of it is like one-off. So it's like, here's a fun game that's 10 minutes long, you play it once or twice, and then you played it and you're done. So, from what I wanted to sort of ask folks is like, how do we get this to scale where there's enough stuff coming out where it's not like these one-off projects where it's like you do a project, you put it out, you do a project, you put it out, because like that like piece by piece by piece will just like it's not going to work to get people on the headsets, to get people excited. So like, how do we work to get it to scale quickly?
I just kind of wanted to go back to the previous question for a second, and then I'll jump into yours. But we were actually funded by Intel going into Sundance, but we built our entire experience in CGI. We're world building. We're trying to create a world that people resonate with and want to follow. So that will go into episodic content and creating a story around the characters that we have in our experience. So I think, creating something that people want to follow and want to engage with, once you have that stream of funding and revenue available is one way to do it.
I mean, I think this is the never-ending question. I mean, I don't know how anyone can answer it.
Sorry.
I think it's a great question to bring up. I mean, it is. It's a funding question. It's a getting a Google jump camera that is stereoscopic, that is awesome looking, isn't just everyone can get one. You have to apply for it, and there's certain things you have to do, and so it's not a it potentially could be user friendly, but in terms of really high quality, it's not. So that's my 2 cents on it. I don't know.
It's a question that I don't know the answer to, so it's just like hopefully someone else does.
I mean, I think a big part of it right now is we don't know how to make money off of VR. There's no clear monetization model. Yeah. So, in Steam, you buy something for $20, which is not really the model that we use, for example, in games. But when you try to do in games where you just spend money throughout the gameplay on in-app purchases, that hasn't been proving to be really popular amongst VR users either. Maybe it's just that we don't have enough VR users that are comfortable for paying for content. You also have the fact that it takes a lot of money to make good content, and people don't want to spend a lot of money on a 10-minute piece of content or a 2-hour game or something like that. There's I think we're still trying to figure out how to actually drive revenue for it. And before that happens, with VCs that we've spoken to, that is also part of it, them trying to understand scalability. How are they going to be able to continue to make products that will make money so they can continue to make products? And on the VC side, that's certainly a big question. And if we knew how, then everybody would be profiting, right? And very few companies right now are making actual profits. So yeah, I mean, I don't know either.
Yeah, there's a women in VR Facebook group, which is open, and I think anyone can join. It's a pretty cool resource. Someone posted in there a week ago, this guy was putting on a panel, he's like, I want to talk to a VR agency that's like profitable for my panel. And it was like crickets. And it was really fun, because there's thousands of people in this group, right? This is a massive open Facebook group. And he couldn't find a single, it was like, you know, agencies that were like, yeah, project to project, we're surviving. But in terms of like an actual like profitable VR agency, it was just like, no one out there. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I think that, you know, the question goes back definitely to the funding and how to get funding to create the content. I definitely do think there are strategic VCs out there. If you look at networks, you know, Hearst Ventures, A&E. A&E's a great strategic partner that we've had. Condé Nast. There are definitely, I think that there are funds that are interested in content. In terms of having people come back to experience the series, I think it will come with the, you know, with that, the build of the content. And I think that we'll see the funds coming out this year, end of this year, by end of this year. And then in terms of scalability, you know, I guess it's also a distribution issue. We talked about the monetization issues. We're definitely, at least at Littlstar, testing monetization models, advertising, product placement. I think the YouTube announced this week will be interesting to see if they apply it to 360 as, you know, a first level of how, you know, they're going to look at paid content. We're also testing with some paid content on Littlstar, so you'll see that go live this in the next like 2 weeks or so. It's going to be more of like an Apple iTunes model right now, but I think that you'll see it move to subscription model, not this year, but soon.
So I have two more questions for the panel, and then I want to make sure we have a little bit of time for you guys to ask questions. I know that we've had some interest. So yeah, so last two questions, hopefully more fun and easy, because we haven't yet solved the growth problem in this 1 hour long panel. What is the best VR experience you've ever seen?
Someone just asked me that question, and I'm still trying to decide. Maybe someone else can start, and I can piggyback. But
This is like ordering dinner
just
at
so
a
many-
restaurant with a group.
Yeah.
Don't make me choose.
That's the problem with it. I don't know.
Maybe like what's a memorable one you've seen recently? What's one that you really like? Like just I want to give people a sense of like all the cool stuff that's out there.
There's this is an older one, and it's one of the first VR experiences that I had. It's called Take Flight, and that one for me, it, you know, kind of had this magical surrealism aspect to it, and it was really well, you know, produced, really well made, and that got my brain going. And I mean, there's been so many more great pieces that I've seen, but for me, that was one of the first experiences that I started thinking, oh, this is like an endless, amazing tool, and there's so many places to go. So yeah, I recommend Take Flight. It's a great one.
I like My Brother's Keeper, which I mentioned earlier. It's great. And then I also think the Ghostbusters, like, if you go, it's fun and it's definitely worth checking out. And I think that model we'll see come out. It's in Asia. I mean, that's what it is. You walk into an arcade and we're playing against our. Yeah, it's really fun, and you actually you come out of there sweating. You felt like you were really like. So check it out. Yeah, I'd say those, and then also just honestly watching someone else in Tilt Brush for the first time is an amazing experience for me, because it's like, yes, this is working, and it's a feeling that you get, that you know, you get those goosebumps and you know you're onto something. But watching one of my best friends or watching my mother in VR for the first time, and her reaction was just amazing.
I've seen some great stuff. I literally cried when I saw something over the weekend. Their piece on Afrofeminism is brilliant. I saw 0 Days is a documentary by Alex Gibney. There's a company here in New York City called Scatter, and they have created a 0 Days VR. It's a 15-minute documentary that felt like it was about 3 minutes, and it was literally the best example that I have seen of narrative to date in this format. There was no way this story told from, it's a story about a virus that the Israeli and American government created that then apparently is the first known computer virus that had the ability to affect the physical world. And the documentary is about the virus, and this experience is told through the position of the virus. It's very profound. The second thing is Tree, which was created by a group, Tree Official. It is incredibly powerful experience of being a tree, and it sounds insane, or it sounds not insane. It sounds very difficult to grasp, like what, but when you do it, it's really provocative and compelling, and it was a beautiful world that they built. It's computer graphic imagery and a lot of other things, but very powerful. And Weaver's The Blue, Swimming with the Whales, my daughter's favorite. She's 8. She thinks it's great.
I think my favorite thing that I've seen recently was Dear Angelica. It made me cry, and that's really not a good thing to do when you have a headset
not
on.
optimized for crying.
Right? The story was beautiful, and it looked beautiful. I also really enjoyed Chocolate. I haven't ever seen that.
That's a fun one.
Yeah.
Tyler Hurd.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a fun, trippy, goofy one. I like that
Yeah,
one.
and there's dancing cats. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, Sashka, my co-director, made Dear Angelica, and that's one of my favorites. It's just with Quill, what he did with kind of narrative inside of something being created. And that was really genius the way he did that, and the narrative, but also just what it did was bringing to life a painting and literally putting you inside of a painting being made. And again, that for me is an example of like taking the spaces of VR that cannot be made. Anything that can't be made in film or experienced in any other way. Yasmin worked on 030, which I loved. That also the POV of being inside of a gene. That was, and just their process was great. I like some of Gabo's early work. A lot of his stuff he worked with the UN, and really I feel like it epitomizes Clouds of Sidra. It epitomizes sort of dock space where you put a camera in a still, like inside of a yurt, and you just exist, like we were talking about earlier. And I think that really that was just so simple and profound. And through you, our project, all live action dance. I mean, it's hard to I'm my worst critic. I wouldn't say it's the best thing I've ever seen, because I just can't say that about my own work, but I really feel like it just follows a lover. You are a lover inside of a love story from the 70s to 2043, and ends with this 92-year-old woman dancing with you, who ultimately actually burns you and the memory that you've become alive. So it's sort of this visceral poem, which I think is an exploration and a quest. We just wanted to push boundaries. We have 270 shots. We cut the fuck out of it, which you're not supposed to do, and it's crazy making, but it was about starting a conversation. So all these pieces, long story short, are conversations being started that I think need to be pushed. And one other thing I was going to say is use light. If you're doing live action, use light and color. It's like this unspoken narrative tool, or unused, underutilized.
So I come from a games background, and I think a lot of these are really fantastic pieces. And then to just come at it from a games perspective, there are 3 in particular that have been really that have really spoken to me. One of them doesn't have the best reviews, I guess, but it was the first piece of content that made me decide to buy a headset, which it was the Harmonix Music VR experience. You just kind of sit and put on your favorite music, and this world happens around you and kind of consumes you. If you get a really good pair of headphones and you just sit and be, I've spent hours in it, and it's the only thing I've ever been able to spend more than a half an hour in before I start to get a little bit sick. So it's really wonderful if you do have the opportunity to experience that. And then Mind Show is a new experience that came out a little while ago, and it's gotten great reviews, actually, great accolades. It's very difficult to explain because it's not going to sound super cool, but you're basically acting out situations as avatars. But it's way cooler than that, and I think part of the reason why it's so cool is because it has an interaction with the outside world as well. So people who are not part of the virtual experience are also watching and participating, and that's something that's really interesting that we're starting to see, are these experiences that bring in the outside world with the virtual world and have participation on both sides. So I think that's a great one. And then the last one, I forgot. So, I remember. Fruit Ninja is great. But, no, I remember. It was. It's called I Expect You to Die. So it's this game that that I am finally getting through this last level that I first tried last year at GDC, and for an entire year I've been. It's haunted me trying to get through this level. But you basically are in these. You're stationary, but you're trying to figure out how to escape the room. Essentially, and you really do, they do a great job of making you experience your entire environment, but in a way that doesn't make you uncomfortable, because there are times where you're experiencing VR in a chair and trying to, do this, and it's really weird unless you're in a swivel chair or something. This is one of those experiences where you can still be stationary but present in a virtual 360 environment and be compelled and use your brain and want to stay inside of it. So that's another one that's really fantastic.
So that was an awesome overview. Hopefully you guys can go download some cool stuff tonight. Two more that I'd shout out that I really liked. Notes on Blindness is a great one. And gosh, I'll also give a shout out to, actually, if you go like 12 stories up in this building, there's something called HoloJam, which this guy David Lobster, who's based here, Ken Perlis, who's also based here, work on. HoloJam did something at Future Storytelling called Flock, where it was you and probably 10 to 12 other people. You had headsets, you had sensors on your wrists and ankles, and you had feathers on, and you were a virtual bird. And it sounds nuts, but I did it with some of my colleagues, and it was just incredibly freeing, because you could kind of just like walk around and bump into people, and you would never do that in real life, right? Like you never just walk into your coworker, but you could see other people as birds, and it was this like very funny, beautiful experience. And I feel like, I don't want to get all Chris Milk on everyone, but it's like, oh, what a tool for empathy. So sorry. Okay, so very cool. Go take the elevator to 12 and knock on their door.
Can I add one more that I think?
Yeah, sure.
I was just going to say, I think some of the work Rose Trochet is doing is really interesting. She did this series called Perspectives that was literally a live action fictional narrative where you are the raped and the raper. And she works with sort of dual POVs. And you actually have a piece here called If Not Love, which you should take a look at.
Oh, and I'll add one more too, and that's the Planned Parenthood experience that Noni de la Pena did, which was, I saw at South by last year. And I actually used to work at Planned Parenthood, so for me it was like, oh yeah, she captured it really well, but I was with 5 or 6 men who'd never experienced that, and they were just like blown away by it. And it's a really good piece, and one of my favorite female VR developers, Veronica Flint, worked on it, so that's a good one to check out. Okay, that's it. Last question, and I am stealing this from Kent Bai, who does an amazing podcast called Voices of VR. I would highly encourage you to check that out if you're interested in learning more about VR. He's got like 500 episodes up. He's the like most prolific podcaster I've ever met, and a really awesome guy. So the last question Kent asks everyone that he talks to is, what is the ultimate potential of VR? And I really like that question. I think that's a good place to end. So we'll just go down the line, and then we'll open it up for the audience.
7 minutes start. This is a big question, right? Well, I don't think that there's a definitive answer to that, but one thing that a discussion that I have a lot with people is talking about VR as a platform, and VR is not a platform. It's a transformative medium. It's beyond TV, PC, internet. It's all of those things in this beautiful, wonderful, incredibly immersive experience. And that means that the answer to that question is just, there's so many things, right? So, you know, I'm in market research. Market research is very much how do we make money and how do we get people to spend money, you know, essentially. But it's frustrating for me because I'm really passionate about this, and I really want people to see this not as just, oh, what do I fund so that tomorrow we'll make millions of dollars, we can sell this company and we can go fund something else. No, you're making things that are going to completely change the way that we experience literally everything we experience right now, whether it be media, medicine, education. You know, and we're seeing already just these amazing little nuggets of technology and experience and innovation coming out of VR. And you know, we're still in year one, right? We're still in that, if even that first year of the lifetime of what VR will look like. And we're already seeing these amazing things coming out of it. By the time my children are my age, I don't have children, so they won't even know what life is like without VR, right? Their life will be completely established on the idea of all the media that we consume plus virtual experiences. And I think that there's no way to conceptualize or understand what that's going to look like. And that's pretty amazing. And it's amazing that we're all sitting here and talking about it this early on and being able to be part of that. Like, I feel very, very privileged to be able to see this happen from the beginning. So it's a non-answer. But because my answer is I don't know, and I think that's actually probably the most beautiful thing about VR.
I mean, just to kind of break it down, I would say when you have an experience, you feel, it's about feeling. Okay, so feeling something, either feeling myself or feeling something I've never thought I could feel, or seeing something I've never thought I could see. So if you kind of boil it down to those two things, like this or other, I would say for me, it's about possibility and culpability. So these are a lot of big words, but I think it can be pretty big. We just have to figure out how to get there. So this idea of agency, responsibility, culpability, I make a difference, right? So I'll kind of boiling it down to that, which I feel like is really important right now in the state of the world. So that's my big kind of mission statement around what this can do and why I'm excited about it.
Y'all watch Black Mirror?
That's, kind of where my brain goes in terms of the possibilities and where we might be. But I will say the thing that I think is really interesting, just looking back on this past year and what I think the next couple years will bring, is from a, creative standpoint, not so much a monetizing standpoint, is the mistakes that people are getting to make and the stories that people are getting to tell is really exciting because there are no rules right now. People are able to express themselves and tell stories they wouldn't ever tell if it was, in a hard block set of rules. And I think we'll see a lot of interesting new work come out of that freedom, actually, in the next couple of years. So I'm not thinking much further than the next 3 years, I guess, and I think we'll see some really amazing stuff.
Yeah, this is a great question. It's kind of like asking, how's the internet changed the world? It's interesting. I think that VR has the capability to elicit emotions that we all, like we've mentioned, that we all have either felt or will feel one day. So I think that VR has the capability of kind of allowing someone to go deeper into themselves, to better understand themselves. And I think that's one of the most powerful things in the world. So.
I'm such a true believer. I'm hardcore. I think we live in a 3D world. The first human on the planet lived in a 3D world. I think the possibilities are infinite. I think these technologies ultimately radically impact the way we look at ourselves and everything else on the planet. I think the applications are so broad. I mean, speaking of children, I do have one. I have an 8-year-old, and she just simply will not know her world. I mean, we were on vacation last week. We were somewhere, and we were at the Tower of London. She's like, "Where's the VR?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" The thing is, she wasn't wrong. Apparently, last summer I just didn't know this, but apparently last summer they had a VR experience. She wanted to see what it looked like in the 14th century. They give you the little audio, so she was like, "Well, where's the VR? I want to see the picture." So I just can't imagine that in every way, shape, or form that 10 years from now or 20 years from now, the kind of conversation we have is going to be all-encompassing and in a multitude of ways, and many of which I don't think we can even begin to understand today.
I think from a more pragmatic standpoint, VR is going to help scientists bridge the divide between neuroscience and the study of consciousness. And maybe help us figure out if we're actually living in a simulation or a real world, which there's mounting evidence for the fact that we probably are living in a hologram. So I just can't wait to get more headsets in the hands of people who are studying the brain and cognition.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, everyone, for coming out and for being on this panel. I hope everyone got a lot out of it. We've got maybe 10, 15 minutes if we want to do questions, and then we'll let you guys go out and do some experiences and have some snacks. So I don't know if there's microphones out there or if people just need to yell, or how's that? I guess just yell and I'll repeat the question.
I can give you the microphone.
Or we can pass the microphone back.
This question is mainly for Maya and Lily. Can you talk a little bit about why you chose the cameras that you chose to shoot 360? And the reason why I bring this up is because I was having a really good conversation about something that I'm working on and which camera we should use because it's doc style and if it would bring attraction to the subject and, you know, ultimately bring attention we didn't want to. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, when we first started, we were just doing monoscopic. So we use a rig of 7 GoPros and stitch it in post, and that's what we did.
Just explain what monoscopic is.
So monoscopic, it's essentially, you're getting, like, you'd have a rig of 7 cameras, let's say, and it's kind of more of a flat 360 VR experience. Stereoscopic is when things are actually, they really feel 3D. You have that perspective, and it's like with the Google Jump camera, there's 16 GoPros going around, so it's actually, you know, the distance between your two eyes, how you actually see plane of perspective, you know, so something closer is closer. If you blink your eyes, you can see it move. So I think once you do go stereoscopic, you don't want to go back just because it's it's so much more intensely immersive that way. So I would say if you can get your hands on something that is stereoscopic, it just goes leaps and bounds.
I mean, there's a lot I'm still learning about this all. We had a residency with Jaunt, which is with their cameras. So that's what this particular project was about. You know, it essentially looks like a big alien head with 24 lenses, and I made it because that's what we were given, and then we also did test the Facebook camera, did some GoPro shooting as well, which you could actually get a lot closer to the subject. We were not afraid of stitches. I feel like let's use the medium. Let's push it. For us, it was about intimacy with our subject, with you. And so we were okay with the variables of closeness. We got Sashka, we moved the camera by hand. We painted the floors black, and we kind of wormed around in black suits so we could move the camera by hand. I really wanted. So we got about up to 4 inches from some of the performance. So that was really, there was not a lot of choice on that. We did compare it to the Facebook camera, and it's so temperamental technologically, and the Jaunt was much more kind of feasible and durable. And we worked with the DP, Dahmer Weaver Madsen, who's this awesome woman I've worked with before, and then Brooke Chapman, who's another woman that kind of manned that camera. So there's a lot of conversation between us as directors, then the camera operator, and then the DP, and then the gaffers. It was like a group conversation. It's not just director, subject, camera person. That's helpful.
I would also say check out the Omni rig also. I don't know. Yeah, that's just another one.
There's another question back up there. If you want to pass the mic.
It's turned off.
Okay, so I guess I just had a question about if you guys have any advice for people who are interested in getting into VR. Do you suggest maybe just jumping into it? Because I just graduated, so I'm wondering, like, just jump into it and try to work with a company that's working with this technology, or try and find a program like NYU has the ITP program where you can work with the VR. So do you just suggest like just jumping into it, or maybe going to school, learning more about it, and then working with it there?
So what specifically do you want to do in VR? I guess that's probably a good question to.
Well, I guess I just graduated from NYU doing journalism and communications, but I want to work with VR just in the sense of what I tell people is just I'm a storyteller in general,
Okay.
so I just want to
So you
tell
want to be
stories in
like a
different
director
ways.
as opposed to like a programmer. That's what I was trying to
Yes.
get at. Okay, cool. Just I suppose.
I mean, I would say just jump in, and I would say watch as much of it as you can possibly get your hands on. If you have access to a rig, go out and shoot something and download AutoPano and get a trial version, and it can have a watermark on it, but you can at least futz around and figure out how to put some images together. And there's tons of tutorials online. I would write down Metal Skybox is a great software. But it's definitely jump in and make a lot of mistakes and just learn from them.